So welcome, audience, to another wonderful segment of Good Troublemakers. As you all may know, the Good Troublemakers was named after our wonderful John Lewis, who was a great troublemaker himself, served some time in Congress, and recently passed away, but his spirit lives and in all of us, and in you two particularly, who are good troublemakers. So thanks for being here. My guests today are Cate Woolner and Mary Link, who, among other things, are nonviolence trainers. And I'm so excited to have you here because not only do you get in good trouble yourselves, have you long rap sheets, as they say, but you're training other people to do the same thing. So you're, we could almost call you professional troublemakers.
I could put that on a resume.
If you got paid, you would be. But I think it's what I really want our audience to experience is what it's like. Once upon a time, we used to train people, and many of us, for Seabrook or Iraq protest or different wars. But now we're training people. You are training people for life, and it's very different. But it's not that different either. So I thought it would be a really good thing for our audience to hear, to really kind of deconstruct the myth of real troublemaking, because I think it's coming more and more, and we need people. I'm looking at the two of you and myself, and white people need, with our privilege, to take some risks, and so it's an invitation to all our viewers to consider risking. What are you risking? You're risking a little privilege. You're risking a little time. You're risking a little freedom for the greater good, for the common good. And God knows we need that now. So yeah. I will stop this lengthy introduction and invite you to talk about. You're both nonviolence trainers, Nonviolent Direct Action Trainers, NVDA. So you see NVDA somewhere, folks, and you know you're in good company. So Cate, do you want to start just talking about your history with nonviolence and how you came to it?
Yeah. Well, way back in the 70s, there was a nuclear power plant that was proposed to be built on the seacoast in New Hampshire. And living in this area, there were already a lot of activists and informed people. And I heard about it, and I heard that there were trainings going on for people who might want to participate in mass actions at the construction site. So I got trained. I think it was in Leverett at the Friends Meeting House. And the people who were at the training, we formed an affinity group. None of us knew each other before, but going through the training together really helped us to build some trust and have some common goals and common understanding of what we were going to be going through. And we went to Seabrook along with about 1,400 other people. And
a few other people.
A few other people, yeah. It was an intimate gathering of 1,400 people. And there were many arrests. Many people chose and planned to get arrested. So that was my first experience. Oh, I should add that, talking about the consequences and the inconvenience, many of us were incarcerated. We were actually in an armory for 2 weeks. And it was not like the experience would be in other situations where I was arrested, where I was actually in a jail, and it was more frightening and isolating. This was more like 2 weeks of really intensive organizing and learning about nonviolence and the history of nonviolence and what else we could be doing. I mean, the worst thing they could have done was put 1,400 people in 4 armories with a lot of free time. So, that was my first experience, getting trained and being in an action.
Yeah. Maybe we should just back up for our audience to learn, when we talk about getting trained, what does that mean? And do you want to talk about that, Mary?
Well, what it means generally is having an experience with training, we call it training, but we're not really training. We're giving people an experience to develop skills. And it's really preparation more than training. And so we talk about nonviolence and the history of nonviolence, and we bring quotes from a lot of different people to bring their different perspectives on nonviolence. And then we do a lot of hands-on exercises. So for people to get an idea of, we give them a situation perhaps, and we say, is it nonviolent or violent? Is it effective or not effective? And they place themselves in a quadrant. And we give them some situation that might be a little controversial rather than totally clear, so that there may be people spread in different places. And then we ask them why they're standing where they're standing. And so partly we use the wisdom of the group. We bring our own experience and wisdom, but we use the wisdom of the group. And they also then figure out with each other. So somebody who was standing over here, after they hear somebody who's over here, they can move a little bit. If they say, oh, that's a good point too. And get an idea of what what makes an action of some kind violent or not violent, what makes it effective or not effective. And you're obviously aiming at getting people to be able to plan actions and attend actions that are going to be nonviolent and effective. And we do de-escalation training in there, both for centering yourself and de-escalating yourself, and also dealing with hecklers or counter-protesters. And we do role plays for the kinds of actions that they might be engaged in. We talk about the legal system and what happens if you get arrested. And we also do some work on community building and forming affinity groups, which is basically an action group, so that Cate was talking about people getting together in this first training and going to Seabrook together. Seabrook was a great model of affinity groups, and with what we call a hub and spokes model. So you had lots of different affinity groups from all over, and each affinity group would send one person to the hub, and that then would be the consensus building group to talk about making the plans, and then they'd go back out and share it here and back in, so that you had a broad kind of consensus model. But the affinity groups also are there for support, mutual support, as you go through the risks that are implicit in getting into good trouble.
That's a great articulation of how 1,400 people can work together. Because 1,400 people, that's really unwieldy, isn't it? But the way these were designed, and I'm so impressed with both the history of nonviolent direct action, but also the way it's evolved, and the way you two have become people who train or really facilitate others becoming nonviolent direct action activists. And
I was just going to add that we talked about the potential for getting arrested. People who come to the trainings don't have to make that decision before coming to a training, and they also don't have to decide to get arrested after the training, ever. There are a lot of support roles that are necessary, and there's no requirement that you go into this knowing that's your end goal. And people can change their mind along the way.
That's a really good point, because I think sometimes we have this hierarchy. We live in the West. We have dichotomies and we have hierarchies, and they're the air we breathe. And I think it's so important, and we've done this, you've certainly done this, in reminding people that there isn't a hierarchy. Your getting arrested isn't necessarily more important than someone else taking care of your family while you're away. And I think it's really important to look at the different talents, the different constraints people have. There's so many that we can
And they
have.
change.
They do.
And they change.
Yes.
You may be in a position where risking arrest works well right now, but then somewhere down the line, you have a new baby, or you're taking care of your mother, or you're starting a new job, or whatever it is. Different times in our lives, or you've just had surgery. And so you have to assess and discern for yourself every time.
And I think that's part of the unspoken nonviolent activity, that that we're not doing a hierarchy, that we're not living that hierarchy of which is better. And I know certainly when I've done support, it's often been harder than being the one who's getting supported.
But I think we don't pay enough attention to the support roles in terms of, I think we do internally, but in terms of what we project to the outside and what the outside thinks they're seeing, that, 1,400 people getting arrested in a giant construction site in New Hampshire. But for every person who was there was somebody in these kinds of roles, taking care of your cat, following you to where you're going to be taken, talking to your boss, making sure you have your meds, and on and on and on. It's a lot of running around. You're talking about how it's not necessarily easier. There's a lot of unknown. It's stressful, but none of this would happen without the support. And I think about some of the really famous nonviolent actions that focus on Martin Luther King or Gandhi. And there were a lot of people who never got named, many of them women, who were making the whole thing possible.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I think that's really an important thing, that the nonviolence training you're doing, the work you're doing, is part of a very long continuum, and it variously becomes very popular and unpopular. So I think what I want our audience to really understand is, in these the times we're living in right now, it probably behooves us all to have good training, to have a really good understanding of what we're up against. When things are so turned around that people who commit crimes are pardoned, and people who don't commit crimes are incarcerated. And so we have some very hard times in our country right now, and I'm so happy that you two and many others are doing this work and really building a community of resistance. And so I'm curious, how's that going? How is that building?
I wanted, just before we answer that question, to note that not everybody, it's great to have an affinity group, but at this juncture that we're in now, hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into the streets that hadn't been in the streets before, that haven't done this kind of protest. And you may not have an affinity group, you may not have been trained. If you have access to a training, and there's a lot of trainings happening online and that you can access online from wherever you are, that will give you at least some of the preparation, but don't go alone. Yeah. Make sure you have a buddy, and in that sense, that's that safety net, that's your backup. Make sure you have a buddy, and that there's also somebody who's not going to be there, who knows you're there, and that you're going to, you're going to follow up and say, I'm home safe at the end of the day.
Yes.
So that somebody knows whether you're okay or not, and that you have a buddy to be there with, and at a minimum. So anybody who's brand new and jumping on the bandwagon of getting in the streets, fantastic. Just come with a buddy.
I want to follow up on what you said in terms of hundreds of thousands of people pouring into the streets. Many of whom have never gone through the experiences of the skill building that we teach. And I don't think that everybody who goes into the streets has to be trained. However, I do want to say that if you are planning on going into the streets, whether or not you think about being in an affinity group, the de-escalation skills are so useful, as you mentioned, both for centering yourself and also if you're dealing with hecklers or counter-protesters. The skills that you do learn are really practical and applicable in those kinds of situations. And if you've ever been in a situation in a large crowd where something happens, and whatever that is, it ripples through the crowd, and there's panic, and there's running, and there's, losing focus, some of which I suppose is inevitable. But if there's a number of people in the crowd who know how to de-escalate, it can be so helpful, even if it's just in that group of 1,000 people that are around you.
Yes, yeah.
And those skills are good in your day-to-day life, too.
That's true.
Right, in case you just happen to face conflict sometime.
So there are a few places we want to go, but one is so someone in the audience, or maybe many people, are saying, so how do I do this? Now we're doing this in Western Massachusetts, where there's a strong group of people who are doing training and learning these skills. How does anybody find out anything? There's some interesting person sitting out there watching this going, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of that before. How do I do it?
It's fairly informal right now. How it's been happening is the folks who are in the cadre of trainers, a lot of people know who they are and will just call one of us directly and say, my group in Montague would like to have a training. So that's somewhat how it's been happening. But as the word spreads, more organizations and institutions are knowing about it. So social media is a place people can find out about it. You know, some of the really large national groups like Indivisible and 50501, Rise Up, etc. They sometimes let people know what's going on. But honestly, right now, it's still fairly informal, and many requests have come in, probably a few more than this group is able to have the capacity to respond to. We're slow in responding.
I wonder also, you know, just in this venue here, we are on GCTV. You are running a show. You know how to reach us.
Yes.
And whether if someone watching this episode of Good Trouble wanted to find out about a training, could they reach out to you?
They certainly could, yes, yeah. So we'll have that information posted, yeah. So I think, you know, it's an interesting thing. We've got the chronology of starting with Seabrook.
For me.
For you. Where did you start? How did you start
I was in college at UNH right before Seabrook and graduated in January or December. So I actually went to the first march and then I left. So, and various things in my life made it, I wanted to be back there, and I regret, you know, I've regretted all my life that I didn't meet Cate back then among those thousands of people. But, you know, I think my first nonviolent action was I rode horses on this back dirt road in New York, and I think we were 15 or 16 in the 60s, and you know, there were all the sit-ins and protests around Vietnam, and there was a movement to pave this road. So it was not really, it was a very self-serving kind of protest. We wanted to gallop our horses on the road, and we didn't want it to be paved. And so we thought, what should we do? And so, you know, a dozen of us, girls who were aged probably 6 to 16, had a sit-in in this dirt road. And the road is still dirt.
Yay!
Great.
I think it probably had more to do with the wealthy landowners that abutted the road, but we did our little part.
Well, I think that's the other thing. You know, it's doing our part, and not knowing how it will turn out. You know, I mean, we think about Gandhi ending British rule in India, but you know, it took a long time.
Yes.
Took a long time, and British rule isn't there, but India is suffering and could use Gandhi again.
Certainly, yes, yeah. So I think, you know, it's interesting to me that there is this ideology, if you will, of we'll have to fight. We have to. By any means necessary, using weapons, using violence against the state, and I think I mean I can understand everybody's frustration. I have frustration, but I also know, and I think it was Tolstoy who wrote, the only thing that happens when you have a violent revolution is the uniforms change. You know, and I know, you know, we're Westerners, we're North Americans, we believe that that instant coffee is a real thing, and if it didn't happen this week, or we can't make it happen by the end of the month or the end of this fiscal year, it's not, let's try something else. There's really this invitation to stay for the long haul. And I think, this is one of the things I really love about John Lewis and his legacy, is that he was in for the long haul, and he moved, but he always stayed faithful. Mm-hmm.
I think it's also, the researchers have shown that more conflicts are won by nonviolence than violence, and more effectively. And there's no instant gratification with the violent. Look at the wars that have gone on for decades in some parts of the world. So using violence isn't instant coffee either. Right. And the massive destruction to the land, killing of people, destroying lives for generations to come, pollution, all of that happens with violent conflict. With nonviolent conflict, you don't have, you're not putting bullets into the soil or bombs and leaving all kinds of terrible chemicals and leaving mines in the ground that are going to blow children up a decade later when they step on it going to school. There aren't those kind of repercussions. So it's better in the short term and it's better in the long term. And if you're in it for the long haul, and there may be, like with violent conflict, there are battles and there's a campaign, and you may have wins along the way. I think, just in our fairly recent history, when the Northeast Direct Pipeline was slated to go through here, and we created Sugar Shack Alliance, and we had a lot of nonviolent action, and both where people risked arrest and just turning out for demonstrations and die-ins and all kinds of things, we were able to stop that pipeline. And there were a lot of new activists that came into it then because it was coming through here. And we then went out to Little Sandusfield in the southwest corner of the state, and some of the people that had just gotten on board thought, hey, this is powerful, we're going to win this one. And some of us that had more experience, I thought we weren't going to win. I wasn't against the opportunity and the possibility we would win that one, but there were already 2 pipelines in the ground. It was widening an easement that was already there. They were farther ahead in the planning, and that pipeline is in the ground. We didn't stop that pipeline, but we succeeded in that we showed up. We didn't sit on the couch. When they came to that little town, the Kinder Morgan and Tennessee Gas came to that little town, 40 people who they recognized from out here were at their first meeting there. And we had, over 100 arrests, 22 in one particular day. And we slowed them down, and we put Sandusfield on the map of pipeline resistance. And it meant that, like with the people who were at Standing Rock to people in Roxbury, that across the country, we're still resisting pipelines and showing up. Whether you win that battle, we're still part of the whole fight against fossil fuel infrastructure. Yeah. And showing up is part of the success.
And I think that's so, I thank you so much, Mary, because I think it really, this is all part of the weave, that whether it's the pipeline, or whatever it is, the Seabrook, whatever we're doing, our opposition to various wars, that we're building a movement that is antithetical to our country.
Yes.
And I think it's really important, because I think as the country is in this crisis right now, that we're really at a juncture, or we will be at junctures, to say what really does work, and what do we mean by working? That means creating the beloved community, basically. It means creating something that we were not founded on.
Yeah.
You know, that it means repudiating some of our history, or at least acknowledging that it wasn't so good. That and the mea culpas are fine, but we don't need to keep breastfeeding. We can say, yes, those were bad. How do we make reparations? But how do we go forward?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, as I was listening to you, Philip Berrigan came to mind, and he you know, his quote, you know, there's no country more violent in the world right now than ours. And you know that our leaders have the audacity to call other people terrorists, just, you know, is heartbreaking.
And expect that they should win the Peace Prize.
Yes.
Talk about cognitive dissonance.
Yes. So here we are, building a resistance that is sometimes actively engaged with the police or with powers that be, and sometimes just among ourselves. But I think this is so important, and I think, you know, even if there weren't the critical issues that we're faced right now, it's important to keep building this resistance, because there's so many people who I had a friend years ago who said her mother during the Vietnam War used to sit at home. She was a widow and sat at home alone throwing socks at the television. Well, that's one thing you could do, or you could get together with other people and look at how we can be creative. And you know, one of my favorite quotes is, the opposite of violence is not nonviolence. The opposite of violence is creativity. You know, that what violence does is it destroys, and what creativity does is builds. It brings to life.
And speaking about that creativity, you know, we've highlighted getting arrested, which is one part, but there are so many other options that we have to resist. You know, strikes and boycotts. Talk about creativity. If you read some of the history of contemporary, meaning say the last 25 years, nonviolent movements and the tactics that were employed, really creative and didn't involve a gun or a knife or a bomb or a fire at all.
Yes.
Blockading with kayaks.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
or J. O'Hara blocking a coal delivery ship in Boston Harbor in a little lobster boat.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There's so many things that so what, when you were talking about that, were there things that came to your mind too besides these two examples?
Wow, there were just so many that whizzed across my brain. Well, this is not contemporary, but you know the story of Lysistrata,
Yes, yes.
where the women were against war and they couldn't get the men to stop warring. So the women withheld their services
Their
and the
intimacy,
wars, their
yes.
intimacy, and they stopped the wars.
Yes, yeah,
So there's that.
yes. There is, and I think that's the other thing for those of you who are watching, to think about different ways that you resist or that you would like to resist, and maybe haven't talked about it with other people, but this is your opportunity to talk about it with other people, to come together and to bring your talents and your enthusiasm to the rest of us, because the world needs everything we can do.
Well, and I think right now non-cooperation is huge, and the powers that be are only held up by our cooperation. And if we don't cooperate with their violence, if we don't cooperate with the executive order changes in rules, and non-cooperation is for everybody. Anybody who has been 2 years old learned the word no. And you know, we've all known how to non-cooperate since we were 2. And so you just tap into your 2-year-old, no, I'm not going to do that, and don't cooperate with what's not right. With everybody doing that, there will be a lot of creative ways to do that.
I was just thinking about the Tesla takedowns. that have happened all across the country, and that the stock value plummeted and the sales of Teslas plummeted, and there was no violence in that. There was just people standing outside of the Tesla showrooms or wherever and making it really clear, we do not agree with Elon Musk's priorities, methods, etc. And he took a hit financially.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And that is a very powerful comment in our culture today. You know, that's and I love that story. Thank you for the reminder, because you don't have to go to jail necessarily, but that's, I mean, and that is really, audience, that's really the invitation of this conversation to you, to tap into your creativity, because we need everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that with that kind of thing, I mean, there are boycotts, and there are also boycotts, which is a new term, so that, you know, support your local farmers by going to farmers market and by going to places where you can buy local foods. And we have a great local foods movement here in Western Mass. And so, you know, we're in a place that's ripe for a boycott in terms of, you know, what you want to have happen in the world in terms of food. And so I think that and the power of the purse can really influence whether it's where you buy your carrots or what you're investing in. And if you have investments, divest from all the military industrial complex, divest from wherever is supporting wars and the things that you don't want to support.
Yeah, so
it can be everything from a carrot to your investment fund.
I was just thinking about how undercutting the value of a product by standing out in front of Tesla and saying why we think this is bad, that's one thing, you know, having an economic impact. But another thing that you can also do is, what about the reputation? There's no person or company that I know of that would willingly want to have their reputation tarnished.
Right.
So bringing to light what the wrong is that you want to stop is also a really powerful weapon, and a nonviolent weapon.
Yes.
We did some of that during Sugar Shack, identifying the big banks that were supporting the pipelines and standing out in front of the banks or handing out leaflets to people going into the banks even to say, this is what your bank is supporting. You might think about, here's some local banks that are not doing that.
Right.
You might want to think about switching your banks. And a lot of people did.
A lot of people did. And also,
and we still have, that's the other thing, is that here we have a lot of things in Western Mass because of this kind of action, whether people were aware that they were doing it that way or not, but we still have local banks here.
Yes.
Yes, we
You know,
do.
we have local banks, and not everywhere do they have local banks.
Right.
So use them or lose them.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and credit unions.
And credit unions.
Local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we have, you know, I mean, I sometimes think of this as a kind of mecca, and I laugh because, you know, we live in Franklin County, which is the poorest county in Massachusetts.
Oh, I thought it was Dukes County.
No, I think we're
won.
We're one of them.
We
We won.
Yes, and I think about that, and I think, well, you know, on the grand scheme of things, in the whole globe, we're so privileged,
Yes.
as you know, but I also think that we have so much going for us, you know, for everything from credit unions and our local banks to our food banks to our, I mean, to our, I mean, I think every day of the week there's a food co-op sale. There's you know, there are farmers markets everywhere throughout the valley, you know, and so if you're watching this from afar, don't move here.
Why do you say that?
Do it at home, because I think if we can do it here, it can be done. And once you know it can be done, you can do it.
Yeah.
That was an old reminder. For very briefly, I lived in Oregon, and Tom McCall was the governor, and he was really quite a good man. and he didn't want Californians all moving to Oregon, and so he would go and it rains a lot in Oregon, but he would go with an umbrella and say, no, it rains here too much. You don't want to come to Oregon. But and I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from coming here, but I think wherever you are, this can be reproduced, and it needs to be.
Yeah.
That I hear from friends, in progressive cities, or cities that could be very progressive, that they're food deserts, and I think, oh my God, why is that so? And so what we want to do really is inspire you, watchers of this, and you who have neighbors who are despairing, not to despair, but to really take courage and to know that that we. I love that reminder. In the end, we're going to win. And if we haven't won,
it's not the end.
It's not the end, right?
That's it. So, yeah.
I think, going back to tying this back into all of the nonviolence, that there's so many ways to do nonviolence. Yes. And to do nonviolent action. And nonviolent direct action, where you may or may not be risking arrest, is one. Non-cooperation and resistance that way is another. And part of what we've been talking about is sort of building the alternative, building the new in the shell of the old, so that you have alternatives. And there have been times that, in authoritarian regimes, where part of the action that was going on was building the alternatives, building the new. Might be hidden initially, but building the alternatives.
Yeah, and I think that there's been important conversation about when you are trying to mount some kind of protest of any kind, whether it's direct action or it's a boycott or whatever, not just talking about what you're against and what you're trying to stop, but also talking about what you're for and what you would like to see in its stead. Because if you're just saying bring down the whatever with no plan for anything after that, then what happens?
Yes.
Chaos.
I think it's so key, Kate, because I think that's really it. What are we doing this for? What are our visions? And I think part of the whole training and part of what we're about is encouraging our visions, and that's certainly that's certainly a marginalized invitation, but we need to bring it into the mainstream.
Yeah.
As bad as things are, they can get worse, and
they are.
We know that there are other things that we can do, that the humans and all of us can. There's so much creativity. Back to that notion.
And the bad stuff, they have a vision for the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So we have to have a vision. To counter that, we have to know where we're going, what our direction is.
One of the things I'm known for around here, aside from nonviolent direct action, is for many years I was a mediator and a mediation trainer and conflict resolution practitioner. And when we're trying to get parties in conflict to think about what the alternatives could be, and we help them to surface what are the underlying needs that you have, not just the wants, but the needs. And then asking the question, if this problem were solved, what would it look like? What would it feel like? And that is such a powerful tool to use for people who are in conflict, to be able to let go of every way in which, I've been harmed by this person, to what would happen if it wasn't like that? What would that feel like? What would that look like? I think that's such a powerful tool.
It's a great question, because you can use it, as you said, domestically, you can use it, locally, but certainly on the national level. And I think that's one of the places we really do need to ask, whether we're looking at what's happening in our Commonwealth or in the country or in the world.
Oh, in the world, totally. I spent a big chunk of the 80s traveling all over the world, leading Imaging a World Without Weapons workshops, and invited people all over the world to envision what a world without weapons would be like. And it was very powerful.
And what would it look like?
Well, it looked like different things in different places, but the things that people envisioned were all the kinds of things, people had enough to eat. They had roofs over their heads. There was adequate care for children. There was not pollution to have to deal with. There was all of the kinds of things that you would want for a healthy life for yourself, your family, your community, your planet. That's what they envisioned.
Yeah. And I think that and what we've been talking about is so important to look at that envisioning. Because I think I can certainly get caught up in how bad things are,
Right.
and opposition to the bad stuff,
Right.
and lose track of, wait a minute, what's the vision? What does, when we are the activated, beloved community, what do we do? Mm-hmm. We feed one another. Mm-hmm. We sing together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We use each other's jewelry. All kinds of things. We share.
Yeah.
So that brings me to a couple of things. This kind of dominant narrative of scarcity. Mm-hmm. That every scientist says, no, it ain't so, Joe. It's not scarce. We've got enough for everybody.
We just don't distribute it equitably.
And that's because
greed rather than scarcity.
Yes.
Yes, because we're not distributing it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I sometimes wonder what do you do with $200 billion?
You buy the government.
That's right.
Oh, that's it.
You buy the government. Right.
Yes. So we have a task because there's so much frustration, and we haven't been trained, particularly in this country. In this country, might makes right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's extremely right, but we won't even go there. Mm-hmm. So the question I have for you, the nonviolence practitioners and trainers, is what's your vision, and how can our viewers and others who are listening to this be encouraged to move forward?
I think one of the things, very powerful things, that keeps us from not moving forward is fear. And I think that we are in an environment right now where there's intentional fear generation to keep us in our places. Mm. So understanding and creating ways not to get trapped in the fear. And fear is something that manifests viscerally, physically. Mm. And so some of the things that can be done would be, you mentioned, I think I did too, the centering things that we can do. Inhaling and exhaling slowly 4 or 5 times resets your neurological system. So just in the moment, when you're highly activated, remembering that you have the capacity to deal with your own fear. I'm not saying that, if you're facing a Tyrannosaurus Rex, aside from the fact that you have to be in a movie, that, some deep breathing is going to make you safe. But I am suggesting that it's not hopeless. You don't have to stay trapped in the fear. And I also think fear is like a wildfire. If I come to you and I go, and that starts you going, and that starts you going.
Yeah.
So starting with yourself, and really thinking about what is it that is making me fearful, and what do I already have that I can have at my disposal to help me to de-escalate my own fear. I don't want to discount or minimize the real fear that many people face. I'm an older woman and I'm white, and so I have a lot of privilege in certain realms. So, let me digress for a moment, just tell a little story. In 2015, there were a number of activists from Springfield, men and women of color, who came to Greenfield to ask people who were part of an organization that I was part of, Racial Justice Rising, would we participate with them in a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Springfield? Because if we as white people were with them, they felt they would be safer. And we did, and they were. So I think that was a way that we as white people got to experience what it would be like, what would we need if we weren't white, and what it is to face a line of cops with none of your privilege, being a person with no privilege. So I don't want to dismiss that fear is real and danger is real. It is. I just don't want us to get trapped in thinking there's nothing but fear and there's nothing but danger.
Also, I want to just highlight one of the things you said is that they invited you.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah. But I think you've also tapped into something else, and that is, for those of us with whatever privilege we have, and in the three of us, it's white skin, that we can't give it away.
Right.
So the question is, and I think this is one of the challenges to all of us, is how do we use it?
Right.
How do we use the privilege I have? And I think, that was a wonderful example, Cate, that when asked to show up for more vulnerable people. And we certainly know that right now there are so many vulnerable people in all of our neighborhoods, wherever you are in this country.
Mm-hmm. And people are showing up and doing essentially witnessing and accompaniment work and interpositionary work.
Yes. So we can say hip hip hooray, that's really good, and let's keep doing more of it.
Tying that back into the nonviolence training, a piece that we've added that we didn't have in our trainings before is looking at power and privilege, and how is that dynamic played out in the planning of an action, in the carrying out, in the aftermath, etc., and what privilege or lack thereof do you bring with you, and what might you want the people in your affinity group to know about you if there is something that would be harmful to you in a demonstration. Like, I can't tell if either of you have a seizure disorder or diabetes or whatever it might be. I mean, I can tell other things about you, but there are certainly ways in which a disability or a way of being targeted absolutely plays out. Right. And so people knowing what your particular situation is and stepping up and stepping in as a person of privilege is really essential in these actions. You mentioned that, when we were in Springfield, we were invited. So when you're going to plan an action, you don't just decide, well, why don't we do thus and such in Springfield? Right. Without ever talking to the organizers and the people who live there, in whose neighborhood this is going to be happening. Right. The audacity of us white people.
Yes.
And I think I just want to give a shout out to the Springfield No One Leaves people, who are certainly leaders. They're the people who have just really done amazing work for a couple of decades now, and it's all locally led. It's led. The people who are in the leadership are people whose homes were threatened.
Right.
So it's a great model, and they do amazing work, and I love being one of their allies. They're and those are replicated. That's not a unique organization. It's replicated all over the country.
Right.
And I think that's the other thing. It's really shining the light on these on these various organizations or groups of people who are working together, who are really the local heroes that we don't hear about. So what we get is the headlines, and they never say anything about Springfield No One Leaves, for example, or racial justice rising in Greenfield.
Yeah.
But that's part of our job.
Yes.
Our work is to really shed light on these and to inspire one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Cate brought up fear as something we're all dealing with now, but the other thing that is being put upon us is divisiveness.
Yeah.
And so I think that the other action that we can all do is, and you've just given some wonderful examples of allyship and working together and honoring leadership on the ground and people where they live and all of that, listening to each other's stories. We have to work on unity, and we have to work on connection, and we have to work on supporting each other and not letting the divisiveness happen. And so that the idea of the affinity groups helps that, but also all of the work across issues, across cultures, across whatever diversity there is, making those connections are really important.
And I want to just build on that and say what's also really important is listening.
Yes.
I mean, as white people, we tend to think we are owed the floor for as long as we want to blabber on. But I think really listening and asking questions and then listening to the answers is crucial for us as allies. And also not to go in thinking, well, you know, I know how to create and plan and train for an action. I know what's effective. I know what's nonviolent. Really? Would you might want to listen to somebody else's views on that?
Yeah. And I think that too, you know, that's part of the whole basis of nonviolence. It's not any power over.
Right.
Yes, it's power.
You know,
power with.
And I think, you know, this is where, you know, it is important to have the community, because it's so easy. I know I can just go off on my own tangent, you know, and I know you can't, because you're
Never.
But you know, to really have those sounding boards, because it's so easy to say, well, of course I know how to do this, you know.
I've done it a million times.
Yes, yeah. And I'll do it for you. Oh, without my asking you. Thank you very much.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other side of that too is if you keep taking everything on and don't include other people and you don't let people help you, you're not going to be around long, because you're going to burn out.
Here,
So,
here.
you know,
Yes.
we need each other in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
And I also I want to come back around in the nonviolence. You know, part of what I would want listeners to know about is nonviolence isn't passivity.
Right.
It is active. It is people power. It is establishing the power that we have to make change, and we all have that power. And there are some who come to nonviolence through faith. There are some who come to nonviolence through practicality. There are some that feel that they need to be, you know, in a nonviolent lifestyle, and they're going to practice that in every angle of their daily life and wider life. There's some that come to it as a tactic, and all those roads are good. And I think that, you know, one of the great things that Gene Sharp gave us was that in a time where people were thinking, you know, you had to be really pure, you had to be peaceful through and through, and, you know, be totally nonviolent on every level. He said, no, you know, you can learn these tactics and you can do this, and anybody can learn these tactics, and anybody can take nonviolent action, can do this. And that, you know, sort of goes back to the two-year-old. Anybody who can say no, but anybody can learn those tactics and exercise those tactics. You don't have to be perfect in any way, shape, or form.
That's perfect. I love that, because for our viewers, you know, you might be saying, well, yeah, but, and I think you just overcame that but, that you can do it. You don't have to become a Quaker. You don't have to become a Buddhist. You can join in this, and I think the biggest thing for me is how countercultural this is, because all of our training is to have power over.
Yeah.
And so it's really it's multitudinal, yes, and so I think, you know, that's where we really do need each other. And I want to just ask, you know, if you have thoughts on that one, please.
Well, I was just thinking about Gene Sharp, and an activity that we do in our trainings is we ask people, have you ever? And then we start with something like written a letter to the newspaper, signed a petition, held a placard somewhere, and then, you know, on to been arrested, but many, many things in between. And so somebody sitting at home might think, well, you know, I don't have the time to go to a demonstration. I don't have the whatever to do whatever. Writing a letter to the newspaper has an impact.
It certainly does.
It has an impact, especially on the very local level. On the very local level. I think hearts and minds have been changed
Yeah.
over time with hue and cry in your local newspaper, for example. Petitions, you might think, oh, I'm just signing this online petition, and what difference does it make? Just to give a very local example, Joe Comerford, our senator, state senator, is really responsive to constituents, and it makes a difference. If she hears from enough people that we want X and we don't want Y, she responds.
Yes.
Now, again, this is the Happy Valley, and we're very lucky to live in this progressive bubble. It's not totally progressive by any means. However, we do have a functioning democracy on the local level.
We do.
And I think writing a letter to the newspaper, calling your senators and representatives, going to their office, that's maybe more than you want to take on, but it's not nothing.
Right.
And I have a friend in South New Jersey who wasn't able, or maybe it was even during COVID, she did this. So people weren't having big demonstrations, and she thought, I can go to the end of my road, little road, main road. I can go to the end of my road and hold up a sign. She started going to the end of her road by herself, holding up a sign. After a couple of weeks, some other people stopped, and they put their chairs 6 feet away from each other, like we had to be. They wore masks. They held up their signs, and before long, there was a dozen people there regularly, And so I think that and we know other stories of people where one person stood out somewhere, and sometimes it just takes one person, and any of us can be that one person.
That made me think about locally the standouts on overpasses over Route 91 from the Canadian border to the Connecticut border, maybe even into
all the way
Connecticut.
down. I think it goes into Connecticut.
Into Connecticut, yeah. And in the beginning, it was a few people on a few bridges. Now, it's many people consistently on many bridges. And the fact that it happens week after week after week after week after week, if you're driving up 91 every Friday and you're seeing them every Friday, after a while, if you haven't been thinking about it, you'll be thinking about it because you have this constant reminder. Yes. And some people say, oh, what difference does it make if a bunch of people are standing out over 91, in Massachusetts, or they're standing out in the tiny little town of, Nutcracker in whatever state. If you hear about it or you see it and your neighbors are doing it, I think it makes a difference over time.
Yes.
As you said, your friend sitting there by herself is not probably going to change a lot of minds. A few people may go, but then the neighbors saw, and then more neighbors saw, and that's where it builds.
It does.
Yeah.
I love that.
And people don't feel isolated with their beliefs either. They see, oh, I'm not the only one that feels that way, and I can go stand there and express this too.
Yeah, and doing that kind of thing, standing on a bridge over 91, is very low risk.
Very low risk.
I mean, people.
There's sidewalks. I mean, there's even low risk of getting hit by a car.
Yes, there is. Very low risk.
It's not arrestable. It's a totally legal thing to do.
And sometimes people drive by you and give you the finger,
And other people drive by and honk and wave and put their thumbs up.
Yeah, so if you don't know where to start and, you have an idea that an hour outdoors might be fun, you'd meet some like-minded people, you'd see some really great signage, you could try that.
Yeah. And I think, if you're not local to Western Massachusetts, you could do it wherever you are.
That's right.
That
you could do it in Nutcracker, wherever.
Yes. Yes, so we'll find Google Nutcracker wherever, and it's probably somewhere in the Midwest. But
join the standout.
Yeah, but because I think it is, and it's so. Maybe it's personalities, but it certainly encourages me when I see the group of people. We're just. We're encouraged by one another.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think right now that's who we need, one another.
Yeah.
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 And I think that word, encouraged, is really important because it means with courage. also, you know, and we give each other courage, knowing there's somebody there beside you or who has your back, and whether you go to the bridge standout with somebody or you have somebody at home who you know who can't go, and so you can go.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're encouraged. We hope to encourage everybody to take some kind of action, whatever it's right for you. Take that step, and then take another one.
Right. People sometimes ask me, so don't you get depressed? Don't you get discouraged? Yes, of course, of course. For me, one of the antidotes to that is action. You know, so whether it's going to the standout over the closest bridge for me or whatever, one small step, I always feel emboldened after that. And, you know, it's fun to socialize and meet other people. You know, if I don't go to the local one, if I go to the standout in Holyoke, I meet other activists.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And I think, you know, to go back to the, you know, encouragement, taking courage. Courage is contagious. It is the antidote to fear too. Because I think, you know, and I really appreciate it. I just want to underscore this, that that there are lots of people who have much more grounded reality in fear than I do.
Yes.
And so I need to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And to also, you know, to notice that we're all part of this same body, you know, and that that we all have different talents and different gifts, and to really appreciate what each other has to offer.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, yeah. So you're continuing to do good nonviolence training, and people will connect to me if they don't know you locally, and I will get to you, and we'll keep this moving, because I think it really is so important. As we started this conversation, these are dire times.
Yeah.
And if they want to plug into actions of various kinds, they can go online and look up Indivisible and Mobilize and 5051 and all of these umbrella organizations that are putting out the word. And when there's a local action, the local action will register with those larger bodies. So you can usually look up and say, where is there something in my area? And then you can find out where the bridge standout is and when it's happening or when there's a demonstration. And there are other ways to find out as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to I know we need to wrap up, but another organization is Surge, Standing Up for Racial Justice, which really focuses on what white people can do. And they also highlight a lot of the local activities, particularly around immigration, but not only.
Yeah. I mean, those are some of the top things, you know, what's happening in Palestine, what's happening with our immigrants, and it's just absolutely appalling. So there's no lack of
work.
No lack of work, right? We'll work for justice. We'll work for peace. But so I think, you know, it's so important to just keep on, and to keep in mind, you know, as I was at an Indivisible rally recently, and there were all these different signs of, you know, Social Security, immigration, and all the different issues that people brought, and I realized that that's rather unique too. That, you know, usually there's a single focus, but we've got this myriad of foci, and we need to stand with one another on each of these.
Yes.
You know, that
absolutely.
That if you think something is not your issue, look deeply, because it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paki.
So thank you both, and we'll keep on keeping on, and thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing your experiences of good trouble, and keep getting in good trouble.
Oh yes, ma'am.
And keep encouraging others to get in good trouble, and so that good spirit of John Lewis will live on and on.
On and on.
Absolutely.